Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have CEO of The Atlantic, Nicholas Thompson, with us today. We're going to chat with Nicholas about his new book in just a moment. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Nicholas Thompson is the CEO of The Atlantic, an American magazine founded in 1857, which earned the top honor for magazines, General Excellence, at the National Magazine Awards in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Before joining The Atlantic, he was the editor-in-chief of Wired and an editor at The New Yorker. He has long been a competitive runner. In 2021, he set the American record for men 45-plus in the 50K race. In 2025, he became the top-ranked runner in the world in his age group for the 50-mile run. His new book is The Running Round, A Father, a Son, and the Simplest of Sports. Nick, welcome into the back room.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
So congrats on the success of the book. It's called The Running Round, A Father, a Son, and the Simplest of Sports.
Yes, it's gone really well. Launch has been good. I've been enjoying it. Learned a lot. Pleasure.
And if you had to start this conversation with one moment that you feel captures the soul of the book, what would that be?
You know, it's the 1982 New York Marathon, and I'm a little kid, and I'm 7 years old, and I'm watching my father come down the bridge. And it's the one marathon I see him run. It's the fastest marathon he ever runs. It's while running his help him hold his life together. He passes. But then, also, and I don't know this at the time, then Bobby Gibb runs by. Right, and she's the first one to run the Boston Marathon, and she ends up being a character in my book, right? And then Cheech Chimoy runs by, right? And he's the Indian guru who influences heavily one of the characters in my book. And then just up a few miles up the road, Tony Ruiz, my future coach, uses running to cure drug addiction. He's watching the race. So it's this moment where all of this is happening, and I don't know what's happening. I just know there's my father, there's me. And then when my father dies, I wrote a little poem or a little story about that race, and I find it in his bedroom in his death. So that moment, which I can only visualize in fragments from 43 years ago, is
wow. It's kind of interesting how the present tense in that moment kind of converged with your future.
Yeah,
in a cool
totally.
way. So tell us a little bit about the book overall and what compelled you to write it, especially at this point in your life.
Yeah, so the interesting thing that happened is that I was a very good runner in my 30s, and I would run marathon for marathon in 2:43 or so, 2:44, 2:42. And I had my first one I had run, and I had been diagnosed with cancer shortly thereafter. But then in my 40s, I got much faster, and I ran 2:29, which is it's a whole different category of fast. You're not winning money, but you're you're among the best in the world at your age, right? You're no longer just the best on your block. You're the best in the world. And I was trying to think through why I had gotten so much faster. And I realized that it was I just had a block about getting faster than I had been before I had gotten sick. And so I wanted to tell the story of the way what makes you fast or slow in running can be buried deep inside your soul, buried deep inside your mind. And that tied in with a lot of my theories about the way pain works in running, which is that a lot of it is a psychological factor.
Yep.
And so I figured, let's do this. Let's go and tell this story. And so that involved telling my story, telling my father's story, and then telling the story of these other runners, like the ones I just mentioned.
And you write beautifully about the relationship with your father. What was the hardest part of revisiting that relationship while writing, and what was the most healing part?
I'll answer the most healing part. The most incredible moment for me was when I learned a lot about my father in the writing process, because I read his diaries. I learned a lot about his father, right? I went pretty deep into stuff I hadn't gone deep into. And the part that was most moving to me was when I was going through old files, and I found a letter he wrote to me when I was 21. And I didn't even really remember it. And if he pushed, I probably could have said that he wrote a letter about me when I was 21. But I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything about it. And I read it, and it was extraordinary. It just saw through my soul and foretold a lot of what would happen in my adulthood. but it was also written with just such love and caring. And he obviously wanted to, warn me of the perils ahead. And then also like saw what eventually I'd be good at. And I just thought, wow, I was lucky to have this man as my father, despite the chaos he caused and the mayhem he like brought about.
Go back in time a little bit and talk about your childhood and what kind of man he was and the dysfunction that you grew up around.
He was an amazing man. He was like a man who, in his high school, college years, like thought he was going to be president of the United States, right? And was sort of John F. Kennedy tapped him, said, this kid's going to be president, right? And we got a recommendation from the provost at Stanford University. It said, this is the best kid we've had since Herbert Hoover. And he won a Rhodes Scholarship, married into a prominent DC family, and everything was going for him. But he couldn't, like, he wasn't quite up to it, right? He didn't have like a certain kind of resilience or a certain kind of like discipline, and he sort of let life get away from him. And then he realized he was gay, which kind of unraveled him. And so he divorces my mother. He moves out in the 1980s, which is when I watch him run that marathon. And then his life is madness, and it's these crazy parties, all of this like wild sex addiction, like hundreds of men coming in and out of the house every year. Like, never spends a night alone. If he doesn't have a boyfriend, doesn't have somebody he's met on, Man Jammer, he's like calling in a prostitute from DuPont Circle. Remember, he would like drive out and be like 10 o'clock and I'd be like reading a book. He'd be like, I'm heading out. And he'd like drive out, and like 30 minutes later, he'd come back with some guy he, paid $100 to. Wow. I'm like, Dad, do you need to do this?
Right.
So it was a peculiar man. And then he ends, by the time his life ends, he's in Southeast Asia with like totally inappropriate boyfriends of all varieties, and just absolute nonsense.
And had you guys talked about his homosexuality? Like, was it something that he ever expressed to you that he knew when he was young that he was gay, or did he just, as you kind of said before, like he just realized at one point it was,
By that point in his life, like he could talk about nothing else. Like he couldn't, as like my sister once said, this man cannot have a conversation without putting his penis into it, right? Like you couldn't talk to him for 20 minutes without. I have two extremely funny, very smart sisters. He was he could only talk about his sex life. Like all he could talk about the last 10 years of his life. Not quite. He could talk about some other stuff, but he would have to tell you like how many orgasms he had the night before. And you're just like, Dad, of all the things I don't want to know in this world, that is number one.
All right, now I got to ask, like, are we talking like 6?
Do you really want to know?
I do. I'm curious to know. Like if he said, hey, son, last night I had, was it a number worth describing?
I remember him coming down once we were in Bali, and he was like, I set a new record, 7.
All right,
Dad,
I'm sufficiently impressed.
I was like, Dad, like, and the man's 75 years old. I was just like, Dad, go away.
Jesus.
Like, I'm trying to like write an article over here. Like, leave me alone. So.
I don't mean to laugh, but it is.
That's the first time that's been asked in like this whole book tour.
That's what I'm known for. I ask the questions nobody else asks.
That's like you've gotten to the soul of the issue.
Everybody's asking your dad. He runs. He does. I now know he had 7 orgasms at the age of 75 in one night. I mean, come on, that's news.
It might have been 74.
We broke news here, man.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. God help us.
And so it's not surprising. And that's why I asked what I asked, not about how many orgasms, but when he realized, because I have people in my life that came out later, and it's like they've been so living what they feel like is a lie, not being their true self for so many years, that when they finally are true to themselves and allow themselves to take that agency and live the way they want to live and be happy and love who they want to love, it's almost like there's an accelerated leap into that world before maybe there's.
So that was definitely the case with my father, 100%. He would often talk about that. He would say, I'm making up for lost time, right, or all kinds of theories to justify his sexual deviance. Because I would say, Dad, like, how much I care that you're gay? 0, right? Like, it doesn't matter. But like, what I do think is that you should like date someone with either a similar age or a similar IQ, just like, or someone who likes similar things, right? Like,
right.
And like, I was like, Dad, you'd be happier if you could like found someone who liked similar music to you, right? Like, don't just You find the like youngest person you can who's willing to sleep with an older American man. Like that's that's not the right market, right? We had a lot of conversations like that. To your question, he definitely, I mean, I think he may have had some inklings, and he wrote about having had inklings when he was young, but he certainly repressed them. You know, he was straight. You know, he dated women through high school, college. Even after the divorce, he sort of went back and forth for a couple of years with women and men. So I think it was a while until he realized he was fully gay. You know, had he been born in a different era, right? Had he been born 30 years earlier, he would have just played straight his whole life. Had he been born 30 years later, he would have come out of the closet in college, or in high school. So it just happened to be that he was born in 1942, right? And then he realized he was gay in 1982, and those are particular eras. And I'm obviously the beneficiary because I wouldn't be here if he'd come out of the closet when he was in high school.
Right. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. And so you've said that you held on tight to running because you came to believe it would both bring you closer to your father and also help you avoid becoming him. Talk about that a little, because I find that really interesting.
Yeah, so the bringing closer is easy. Like, it was a way of mourning him, right? We ran together. We'd love to talk about running. You know, it was a thing we did. He introduced me to the sport. Clearly, I went into marathoning because of him. So, you know, when someone dies and you love them, you mourn them. Maybe you mourn them through the thing you did together, right?
Right.
Play guitar together. You go play guitar and you think about him. You go on long walks. You go to the same place. But not becoming him is harder, right? So it wasn't like I was literally like, we're different people, right? I'm straight, for one. You know, I'm much more disciplined. I don't drink, right? Like, I don't drink very much. There's a difference between us. I don't have an addictive personality. But I watched him just struggle with like getting anything done and like staying on task and like just keeping stuff together. And so I really didn't want to lose that. And I felt like running is a way of maintaining discipline and focus in your life, and even during a single day. And so I just kept running, in part to not ever let my guard down on this question of discipline.
Mm-hmm. And you guys had different, the way you prioritized running in your lives and the impact on that prioritization. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So for my dad, like running, he didn't run, like he started running, he'd run like a mile a day in the 70s. It was like a way to lose weight. And then he got into like the running boom in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And, for a period in time, it was a thing that he cared about a lot. Ran that great marathon in 82, or 301 marathon. And then it was sort of less, right? He didn't track his mileage, he didn't track his heart rate. But he would run because it was fun. It was interesting. You go places and you run with your son and you run with your dogs. For me, it's much different, right? I have all these goals. I have try to set these records. I run all the time. When I do, I track my heart rate. I track all these metrics. I'm tracking my HRV in the morning, so I know like what my workout should be, or how it contributes to my workout. So we have very different relationships. I'm much more intense about it, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and you alluded to this before. You said that your dad often warned you that life kind of falls apart at 40.
Well, he very specifically warned me. So when I turned 40, he like puts a message on my Facebook page, which was like, I don't know, 60,000 followers. Like, it's a public Facebook page. Like, it's not. And he's like, son, happy birthday. Life is going well for you. Beautiful wife, 3 great kids. But you should know that all men's lives fall apart at 40. Like, the pressures are too much, and the temptations are too high. It happened to your grandfather. It happened to me. Sure hope it doesn't happen to you. I was like, what?
Could have been worse. He could have said, and I had 9 orgasms last night.
He could have put it up, and probably did. I probably put that somewhere else on the internet. It was just a very strange note for like,
right.
Something. I think his argument was, when you turn 40, you no longer have youthful promise, right? Like, and this is one of the things he talked about a lot, right? He whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make promising. He had all this promise as a young man, like all these expectations, like the Saturday Evening Post. There's this big picture of him, the college student, right? And like what college kid gets photographed in like a way like that today? Anyway, so there's all these expectations, these burdens, and you can kind of dine out on them through your 20s, right? You can be the Rhodes Scholar, and you can be a former Rhodes Scholar until you're like your late 20s, and you kind of got to get some other stuff going. And by the time you're 40, you can't hide at all, right? You can't, like the fact that you got good grades in college and teachers thought you were smart no longer matters at all. And so you're 40, promises run out. You got to take care of your kids. You got to take care of your parents. You're starting to decline. Like, you're probably not making as much money as you hope. Like, there's a lot of pressures that come on someone, and then, you're a man, and he was tempted by all the temptations of the world, and so it felt like that happened to lots of men. So.
Yeah, it's just an interesting worldview in a sense, because you could just as easily argue the other side of that coin, that I look at my own life. It's like, God, at 40, I would never want to be 25 again. You finally, emotional maturity and confidence and secure, and so it's just interesting when you hear someone say that it just falls apart at 40,
I know at 60 you probably want to be 40. I mean, I don't know, is 40 the worst age, the best age? What age is the best? What age is the worst? I have no idea. But for some reason, 40, it was the year of his divorce. It was also the year his father, the year his father.
Yeah, well, he sounds like he was struggling with some things,
Yeah. But I made it through 40 and I'm okay. We'll see whether
you proved him wrong. And so how did running together shape your understanding of him, and how did it influence your own identity, both as a runner and as his son?
Well, it shaped my identity. First off, it was the first thing I was good at, right, in high school. So that gave me an identity. It made me a person, right? I went to this intense competitive high school, and I was nobody, and then I was good at running, and then cool, I was somebody, right? And it's not like being captain of a football team, right? Like the girls aren't lining up to, date you. You're a runner, but it's something. So it became part of who I was, and then it became a way I sort of explored the world. And so I would go to new cities and I'd run around them. I would every time I went to a new place, I'd run. It's how I learned geography. I learned spatial mapping. It became the way I processed.
I did that.
Yeah, it's the way I learned to process pain. When I would be in a bad mood, I'd go run, right? And then it became the way I learned how to meditate. If I needed space to go out, I would just go out and run and listen to the birds. And so, it really shaped, and then it became part of my practice and my discipline, and then a big part of my life. So, big part of how I lived. And that was really important.
Yeah. And it's also been a way for you to mourn your father after his death. How did your runs help you process grief? And did that journey through grief with running, did that change in any way over time?
I wasn't really aware of it when I was doing it, but it is the case that after he died in 2017, I started to run much harder, right? And I started to run much better. And he had this theory that he could only run well after his father had died, because his father had been such an intimidating force who had wanted him to succeed athletically, and he had felt like such a failure that he needed his father to die before he could succeed athletically. My relationship with him was clearly different, because I had always been a success athletically, at least compared to him. I was just coordinated and better at throwing a baseball than he was. But I think that I started getting better and more serious because A, it allowed me to think about what he had meant, B, it was a thing we'd done together, was kind of mourning, but also one of the things that my father gave to me, for better or worse again, is this intense ambition, in the sense that, as he said, if there's something better, I should go for it, right? That was what he believed, right? If there is a thing that has some meritocratic value, you try to get it. So there's an interesting question of running. Why is it better to run a 230 than a 240? Who cares, right? But to me, it's never been a question, and partly for my father, a 230 is better than a 240. A 220 would be better than 230. God, I wish I could run a 210. And this sort of striving for excellence, which can be a demon. It can torment you. It can drive you to despair. But that is something that my dad gave to me. And maybe it would be better if he hadn't. I was more chill, and I was yeah, man, I ran a 4-hour marathon and it's awesome. But that wasn't the way I was shaped or molded. And he's the one who did that. And so, or he's a serious contributor to it. So that was so it was after his death that I went from running 240s to running 229.
And you're right about the mental component of running, that like the things that hold you back, I think your quote, aren't just physical, they're what's in your mind. Can you elaborate on how you trained your mindset, not just your body?
Yeah, so this is important and interesting. So there's a theory in running to which I subscribe, and it's called the central governor theory, which is a terrible name for it, but that's what it's called. And the idea is that pain is elements of it are physical. And right, if I like step on a nail, my foot hurts, and that's physical, right? Or if I run and I stub my toe, that's physical. But most of what happens in a race is not physical. In fact, it's mental. It's your brain kind of running an analysis of whether you can maintain homeostasis. And when it gets scared, it sends pain signals. And it sends them kind of like to weird places in your body, like your hamstring hurt, even if there's nothing wrong with your hamstring, right? So I just ran a marathon. My hamstring hurt like crazy for the week leading up and during the race. Nothing's wrong with my hamstring. It's totally fine now. It's just my brain like identifying a place because it's worried about going too fast. And so once you realize that, and there are all kinds of experiments that prove it. In fact, I'll tell you the experiment that proved it to me without a doubt. I only understand this in retrospect. So when I was in high school, I ran the 2 mile when I was during the track team, and I run in like 11 minutes and 40 seconds, which is fine. It's not great. And then the big race of the year came up, and I was like, I'm going to run it in 11:30, and like 21 seconds a lap will be 11:30. I was like, that's the maximum I can do. I'm so tired at the end of a race. Like if I run 11:30, I'll be exhausted. But if I do it perfectly and I hydrate and do a good job, I'll get it. So I go out to the track, and it's at a different track at a different school. I go out and I run 21 seconds a lap. But the track is bigger. And so when I finished the race, I've actually finished in 10:48, which would have been utterly inconceivable. And had I tried to run 10:48 on my home track and had someone told me how fast I was running, not a chance in the world. My body would have shut down. I would have had all kinds of pain because I knew I couldn't do it. I had to like trick myself to be able to do it. And so it was a reminder that, you know, there are real things that slow us down. There are biological limits, but a lot of it is just in your mind. And so once you realize that, you have a different way of running and a different way of training.
Mm. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't experience because perhaps maybe most people don't run, but they often hear the term runner's high. I remember before I started running, I would hear that and I'd be like, oh, bullshit, there's no runner's high. What is that? You know,
yeah.
And then I started running and I, what's that?
You get a runner's high?
I do get a runner's high. Not all the time, but there's that. Yeah. And the way I describe it for me, and I would imagine those who have experienced it or do experience it, it's different for everyone, right? But for me, it was that moment where I was running and I just started almost like I felt like I was floating. Like I could just keep going. I could keep going. And the more I ran, the more I wanted to run. And I got to this like euphoric place. But how would you define it?
It's funny because I'm not sure. It's like when people talk about runner's high, it seems like this specific thing they notice. I kind of get high when I run, but it happens like anytime I run in a beautiful place or anytime I get in a groove. So I don't know whether I'm getting dopamine release. I don't know what the physiology is of what exactly is runner's high, but there are definitely mental states I reach that are really beautiful when I'm running, right? When I go out and I'm like, I'm going to go run, like it's so great when you go, I'm going to go run 10 miles at 6 minutes per mile, and you go out and you're running like 5:57, right? You're just running a tiny bit faster and you feel so good, right? And you're not getting tired and you stay there and you run and you're like, I could run forever, right? It's that there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Yeah,
well, that's not cool.
I think it's a very subjective thing, and people probably describe it, if they feel they have experienced it, it probably is, described in a million different ways. You write that running teaches, quote, that you have to learn to run when you hurt, and you have to learn to hurt when you run. So how do you balance pushing yourself and respecting your body's limits at the same time?
Yeah, so what I meant by that is, like, you can't, that's a passage about getting fast. And you can't get fast if you just jog 5 miles a day. Like, that's cool, it's good, you'll live longer, right? You feel better each day you do it, and it'll help your discipline. But if you want to get fast, you jog 5 miles a day, 4 days a week, and 3 days a week, you have to push yourself, right? You have to go out and you have to run a mile as hard as you can. Or you have to, sprint up the hill, right? My favorite workout to do when I'm just getting into shape is like, you just sprint from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill, jog down, do it again, do it. Depends how big the hill is, but maybe do it 20 times. And you've got to learn, because that's how your body gets stronger. You have to stress it, break it, and then it rebuilds itself stronger. You have to stress it, break it, rebuild itself stronger. So it's this very specific process where your muscles, in order to repair and grow, you have to break them down. And so you have to learn to hurt when you run, because otherwise you're not going through that physiological process. And then you have to kind of learn to love that process, because it's not an easy one. And what I found is that when I'm in a really good training cycle and I'm, getting faster and I'm doing well, I kind of love the constant searing pain and you stand up from your chair and you can't really walk because your legs are so sore because you've been pushing yourself so hard. And it's not like that feels good in the moment, but the process feels good and it feels like the right thing to be doing.
Mm. And so perhaps the most fascinating or even surprising thing in your book is how you challenge this belief that we slow down with age.
Yeah.
And you have some pretty impressive stats about how your running, your performance has over the years been significantly better than when you were a younger man. Talk about that, because I think that's the thing that bothers everyone. Whether you run or not, it's like, I'm getting older, I'm getting slower, I'm just not physically as fit. It's like this machine is slowly dying and one day it's going to stop.
Yeah.
And you sort of dispel that myth in a way that's just truly fascinating to me.
Yeah. So my view is that, the way speed works, it just kind of ebbs and flows and hills and valleys. Like a lot of things in life, you have good periods, you have bad periods, you have good periods, you have bad periods, you have good periods. And it reminds you not to be too up when you're up, but too down when you're down. Like it gives you courage when you're in the trough and humility when you're at the peak. And, my view on aging is that aging does slow you down. And there is obviously the bad things happening in my body. And it takes me a lot longer to recover when I turn my ankle, and it takes me a little while to get going when I run, and probably have lower bone density than I did 5 years ago. But you can counter that, right? And you can counter whatever the thing that you're worried about. You can counter it by training harder and training smarter and thinking more deeply. And you can learn how to, there are advantages that come with age too, not just wisdom, but capillary density maybe increases as you run. And so I'm better at running long distances now than I used to be. Maybe there's something that comes with age and experience and cumulative miles. And so there's two processes. One is figuring out the things where you can take advantage of age. And two, kind of, if age is moving you backwards on a moving sidewalk, you run forwards faster than it's pushing you backwards. And, an example I like is my mother came to me this summer and she's like, my reflex is getting worse, right? They just keep getting worse. And I was like, Mom, they don't have to get worse. She's like, they are, I'm 77 years old. And I was like, Mom, here, catch this tennis ball. And so we went out on the porch and I would throw a tennis ball, work on our reflexes. And, it was just showing the process that whatever is whatever it is that you're really worried about with age, you can counter it.
Yeah. I personally feel I'm in the best physical shape I've ever been. And I'm 60,
Wow.
And I'm 66. So either that means I totally agree with the suppositions you're making, or that I was in really bad shape when I was younger. So we'll just leave that up there for.
I mean, it's amazing. Being in the best shape in your life at 66 is amazing.
Yeah. But to your point, it's just a lot of it is what you do. When I was 25, I didn't go to the gym every day. When I was 30, I didn't run every day. Yes, there are things that happen to your body. You can't stop that. The aging process, unfortunately, is not a pretty one sometimes. But there are things you can do. Like what you said, you can counter this stuff sometimes.
And if you think about, I don't know, say filmmaking, right? If you think about a young filmmaker versus an old filmmaker, there are things where you get worse. There are things where, maybe your ability to come up with surprising stories is worse, but your ability to maybe see patterns is better, right? You end up sort of the crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. So there are things that you get better at, there are things that you get worse at as time goes on. And so, as you get older, I feel like it's about accepting your age, but also not giving into this notion that you're just heading backwards.
Mm. Yeah, it is something that I think people do have some agency with. Now, you hold the fastest 50-mile time in the world, not in New York or the States, in the world. That's a big place for your age group. I mean, that is truly amazing. I can't even imagine what it's like to run.
Well, I did until last week, Andy. I just got broken.
Really?
One one of my buddies.
My
just
timing is
broke.
always off. That's what they say about
Yeah,
me.
well, I had the world. I still have. It's the second fastest time of the last 20 years, but it was
You
now the.
slacker.
Yeah, I do have the American record in the 50K, but I'm gonna have to go get that 50-mile record back.
How does one run 50 miles? I can't. I get exhausted thinking about driving 50 miles.
You just got to let it go. It's
How long do you have
it's,
to train to build up to something like that?
you know, it's funny. I remember I ran this 50-mile race and it took me like 5 hours. And I was just the whole time, it was just like, I had very little stress. It was just kind of like blissful and thoughtful. Like I had pain. And then I flew 5 hours. I was like so annoyed by the time. I was like, man, this flight is long.
Well, did you think in that moment, like, I ran the amount of time this
I remember thinking, I was like,
plane
this
is going
so
at
weird.
735 miles an hour. I'm
Why
running
am I
this.
annoyed by the airplane? You know, it sounds impossible, and it would have sounded impossible to me a few years ago. But you just start trying, you start training for it, and you get there.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so you do write a lot about learning to run through pain.
Yeah.
And that it's both essential but dangerous. What
Yeah.
have you learned about, how to distinguish productive suffering from harmful suffering?
Well, so there are a number of ways. Like, so you kind of get an intuitive sense, right? And I have now pretty good intuitive sense of what is real pain and what is fake pain. Not perfect. Like, there's still some flaws and still some errors in it. One good way to test is like, is the pain evenly distributed or is it on one side and not the other, right? If you kind of have pain in both your hamstrings, that's good, right? If you have pain in one of your hamstrings, well, that's potentially bad because you probably didn't strain both your hamstrings. Is the pain familiar? Is it something you've had before? Like I can't describe. I could try, but there are like 12 different kinds of knee pain and I can tell you what they are, right? And I, in fact, have a very particular kind of knee pain right now that I often get after I run with too much stuff in my backpack. And the other day I ran with like 3 books in the backpack. It was pretty heavy. And the next day I had this pain. Books. I had like I wanted a friend of mine to sign books that I'm giving away as Christmas presents.
Oh, your
at his
books.
house. No, it was actually his books. And his book is, unfortunately. And so I ran to his house with 3 books, and then I ran back. It was maybe 4 miles. And then the next day I was like, oh man, I've got that pain again. And I can't tell you what is different about that pain from other kinds of pain, but I know this pain will go away in a day or two, right? And I know that other kinds of knee pain last longer. And in fact, I need to treat them, right? Or I need to use the foam roller at night. And so you become, and maybe this is one of the things that comes with age, you come to really understand these different kinds of pain and different kinds of aches. And if you're good at it, you can stave off injuries.
And it's just like listening to your body, like paying attention to what your body's telling you. Is there a chapter in the book that you feel was the hardest to write emotionally or structurally, and why?
Weirdly, yeah, it was actually. The one that was hardest to write was the chapter about my 20s. And because a lot happens and I'm shaped by running in lots of ways. But most of the interesting stuff that determines the rest of my life and that matters doesn't involve running, right? Like I'm kidnapped by drug dealers. I have like a bunch of really tough professional experiences. I get fired from a job, but it's mostly disconnected from running. And so, how to write about, this is a book about running. It's not a book about Nick. And I had this kind of, everything has to tie into either my father or my story running. And I ended up with like a whole bunch of different versions of that chapter. And also like kind of moved slowly because my life was also a little bit boring, despite the kidnapping. And that was the hardest one.
You mentioned before about your cancer.
Yeah.
You've been pretty open about your experience with that. You were diagnosed with thyroid cancer at 30.
Yeah.
When you returned to running after cancer, did you feel more just that you wanted to get back to where you were or, beat your times? Or did you go through a period where you were just so gratified to be alive and being able to run and being able to enjoy the process?
It was very much the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Very much the latter. I mean, because you go through it and you can't walk a block, right? Like I couldn't walk around the block from my house, right? And I certainly couldn't run. And, and then I was so dizzy all the time. And then like neurologically, you feel so far off, right? You just, your body moves in completely different ways. It's like you put on like a Halloween costume and you try to run and like it doesn't feel like you, or put on like steel boots and you try to run, it doesn't feel like you, and I just didn't feel like myself when I would run. And so just getting back and feeling like I was Nick again was really important. And then gradually, I wanted to run fast. And so I worked and eventually got myself to the point where I could run fast again.
And how did this journey with cancer influence the themes that you chose to emphasize in the running ground, especially the ones about persistence, reinvention, inner strength?
The thing that was most interesting about the cancer, so I was, it was late in the reporting of the book, and I was with Arthur Brooks, and we were at some event in Montana. Arthur writes for The Atlantic, studies happiness, really smart guy. And I was just sitting and we were like killing time in a van, like before we drove to some other thing. And I said, Arthur, what is the single best predictor of happiness for adults? Right? And I had like this theory, I remember it being told me by my dad, that it's like your relationship with your siblings, right? And is it that? Is it the amount of money you make? I was like, so what is it? And Arthur said, well, there's really only one thing that leads to happiness and productivity. I was like, what is that? He's like, getting cancer and surviving it. And what he meant was, he pointed me to a bunch of studies on what's called post-traumatic growth. And if it doesn't have to be cancer, it could be some other disease that's life-threatening. If you go to the edge and then you get through it, you end up having a different relationship to life. You like take it more seriously. You care more about the people who are close to you. You care less about the other stuff. You become more religious. You tend to work harder. You tend to be more satisfied with what you're doing. You tend to like doubt yourself less. Like I probably wasted a lot of time in my 20s, like worrying about what I hadn't done and worrying about what I couldn't do. Right. And then maybe in my 30s afterwards, I was like, well, this is just, here I am, and I've got a limited time and I'm going to do the best I can. And so, there's this sort of interesting mystery in my life. There's this running mystery, which is I got much faster at my 40s. And then there's professional mystery, which like I've had all the success as a journalist. I've done great, right? To the New Yorker, I was the editor of Wired. I'm CEO of The Atlantic. Like I'm crushing it. Like I'm doing great. And in my 20s, I kind of bit. Like I couldn't get anybody to hire me, right? And so it's not like I had this, obvious talent or this gift that, was blindingly obvious. I wasn't very good, and you go back and you read those stories and they're okay, but they're not that good. And so, what changed? Well, part of what changed is I went through this really hard experience. I came out on the other side, and that made me better writer, right? Or better thinker, or whatever it was that, made me end up, that I've now had a nice run professionally. And we'll see when it ends, but for now it's going pretty well. Could end tomorrow. The board might call me.
Stop.
After they listen to the
that would be weird if it actually did happen tomorrow.
That would be weird.
That would be breaking news on this podcast. You run with your 3 sons. What is that experience like for you? And what do you hope they understand and appreciate from the book about you, your father, or the role running has played in your life?
So they all read the book. They're all very smart kids. I run with 2 of them. One of them doesn't run. He's we go on long hikes together. I want them to. I hope it would be nice, and I don't care whether but like it would be nice if they see that running can be a way to open up your mind, that can be a way to like learn discipline, that can be a way to, learn productive habits. I would love it if they decide they love running up mountains. I would love it if they decide they like racing. 2 of them, run a lot. One just broke a 5-minute mile, one just broke a 6-minute mile, the 11-year-old and the 15. They're fast. They have all the talent in the world. They're mostly soccer players. I like that we can share this thing together. But what I most like, I want them to, I'm proud of my discipline, and I'm proud of my focus, and I'm proud of the way I can be both disciplined and balance life. And I think I exemplify that a little in running. And I'd like them to see that lesson and catch that lesson and absorb that lesson. Like I'd like them, when they're passionate about something, to kind of have the same approach that I have towards running, or to at least have learned from it. And It's actually, I've thought about this a decent amount, which is they don't really have any sense of like what makes me good as a journalist, right? They know that I like read books and write, but lots of people read books and write. But they can kind of watch and observe, particularly when they were younger, even when they were 8 or 9, they could watch and observe the running, right? And they could see. I think that you can get clearer lessons because it's easier to understand. And so I think maybe the running has like kind of painted myself in bolder colors for them and they can understand it. But I hope.
Is running a metaphor for life, or at least your life?
It's a way, I don't know if it's let's see. It's a way to understand, a lot of the things that happen in my life. And now I could stop running tomorrow and I hope I would still have an interesting life, but it's a way of like a lot of the things that I've thought about that are, most important have come through or connect to running in some ways, which is kind of the goal of the book, which is to say, hey, like, it's not really a book about running. It's a book about obsession. It's a book about pain. It's a book about life. And I have some lessons that I can convey and I have some stories I can tell. And there's some people I can introduce you to who are amazing. And I think if you read this book, you'll have an understanding of pain and life and obsession. But it doesn't have to be about running, right? And it could have been about something else. It just happens to be that running was the thing. So that's like the message that I convey with the book and how I try to persuade people to read it. Like, it's not like, hey, I want you to read this book because when you do, you'll run 5 minutes faster in your marathon. It's, I hope if you read this, it'll like open your mind up to sort of different ideas about pain and parenthood and forgiveness. So that's why I did it.
In our last few minutes, let's do a quick lightning round.
Sure, bring it.
All right.
Yeah, happy. Bring it, Andy.
How many orgasms have... No, I'm just joking on that one. Favorite time of the day to run?
6 a.m.
Favorite mile of a marathon?
17.
Strangest thought you've ever had on a long run?
Becoming obsessed with the way my shadow moves under street lamps while running early in the morning, and like watching it as you approach a street lamp, and like it's kind of behind you, and then you eventually move ahead of it, and it's in front of you, and it like tracks you and circles you, and like just totally becoming fascinated with that, and then like trying to run under more streetlights to have it experience more.
What do you listen to when running, if you listen to stuff?
Nothing.
Nothing. So you don't have anything on?
Just the sounds. I mean, sometimes I'll listen to, if I'm running to work, I'll listen to podcasts, but if I'm running if I'm on a good run, I'm not listening to anything.
All right. Besides the back room, favorite podcast to listen to when you're running?
Well, those runs, yeah, Radio Atlantic. I don't know. I probably listen to Up First from NPR if it's early morning, and then Tech Meme Ride Home when I'm running home.
And if you do listen to music when you run, who do you listen to?
Don't listen to music when I run.
Okay. One training mistake you'll never make again.
I think that this was kind of interesting where you'd think that I would know this, but I ran the New York Marathon 2 weeks ago and I did terribly. And I think it's because I got sick. And I think I got some kind of a respiratory infection and I kind of tried to run through it. And so I think that made it worse. And I think what I should have done is I didn't get my flu shot. I should have gotten it the month before the race. I figured I'd wait till after the race just because it can kind of screw you up for a day. And I should have gotten my flu shot before the race.
One word, maybe two, that describes the feeling of finishing a marathon.
Euphoria.
Favorite brand of running wear?
Nike and Tracksmith.
And when you're not running, what's your next favorite way to clear your mind?
Playing guitar.
Oh, cool. What kind of music?
Acoustic fingerstyle guitar. I play kind of like Michael Hedges, John Fahey stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm a drummer. We'll jam sometime.
That'd be great.
Nick, this was great conversation. Thanks for coming on. Good luck with the book. People should run out and get it.
Run out and buy The Running Ground. Andy, it was so fun to talk with you. Thank you for all your big questions. Thank you for the lightning round questions. Thank you for inappropriate questions. It was perfect. Thank you so much.
Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.